here's a big misconception. People think that condoms, like, oh, just use a condom, you'll be fine. However, herpes is not a bodily fluid transmission.
Hey everybody, welcome back. I am very excited today. I have Alexandra Harbushka. I hope I'm saying that right. Thank you.
You said it perfectly.
With us today. And Alexandra has a show called Life with Herpes, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So I'm excited to loop you guys in. Alexandra Harbushka's life was sent into upheaval when she received a call from her doctor diagnosing her with herpes. Shaking, feeling like her life, her goals, happiness, and desires had all just gone up in smoke. She was left scared shitless. And with a new mission to share her story with people just like her and to let them know that their feelings are normal, natural, and that they're not victims. With that mission in mind, she founded Life with Herpes, an online community consisting of a podcast, a website, YouTube channel, wellness products to support the skin condition, and an online community that provides support, all dedicated to shattering the stigma of living with herpes. Before founding Life with Herpes and becoming a mother to her son Clinton and a wife to her husband Bill, Alexandra worked in corporate America with roles ranging from Ralph Lauren to selling new home construction to being a mortgage loan officer. Her education includes a bachelor degree from the University of Arizona. Bear down to my fellow Wildcats, she says. A postgraduate certificate in ministry, and is currently working on a master's in theology. Damn, girl. She's also an ordained minister and provides ministry counseling. All right. Well, that's like quite a fascinating bio, and I love it. Yeah.
All over.
Yeah. I mean, my undergrad's in finance. So like, I'm with you. I'm like the career changing. We're both career changers and
huge career change.
Yeah. But I think we moved in a good direction, going from the boring stuff to more interesting stuff.
Well, stuff that interests us, right? And stuff that was almost brought to us. Like you obviously felt a calling to talk about what you're talking about. I felt a calling to support people living with herpes. It just fell in my lap.
I actually love the combination you have of like kind of the theology ministry stuff and like talking about sex and genitals.
And that's wise because so many people associate sex with shame, even, even in my coursework, we've had to talk about sex and intimacy and things like that. And people in my classes will say, no, sex is between a husband and a wife for procreation. And I get lit up. Right. So yeah. And it goes back to, we can bring in religion to this. Someone told someone, and it's been generational of, well, sex is bad, sex is shameful, and you should only have sex in a marriage and yada, 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 right? And so it doesn't say it anywhere in the Bible that like you're going to get herpes if you're a bad person, like all these things, right? So a lot of times people associate having herpes with, well, I'm being punished by God or I'm being punished for behavior.
Wow.
And I'm like, it doesn't say it anywhere in there.
No, I'm pretty sure that doesn't that's not how it works. It's just a virus in science.
That's not how it works. Right. It's a numbers. When I say numbers game at some point, it's a numbers game in the sense that majority of the population has herpes. And so it's pretty much inevitable.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's inevitable not to come in contact with somebody. Like you cannot not come in contact.
Right. But I do think it's interesting how having oral herpes, people will just call it like cold sores. Unless you're, unless my sister-in-law who likes to say that she has herpes. I don't know why, but it's like, why do we kind of downplay one and like emphasize the other,
Shame goes back to shame, has to do with sex, goes back to, scarlet
it's all
letter.
Just made up,
all that stuff,
which I'm so glad, which you get. I don't have to tell you that, but like, it's like what we decide is okay or not okay is all just made up. So like, let's quit being weird and making our lives more difficult. That's kind of my feeling about it. But the part of the reason I want to have you on anyways was I dated somebody with herpes for a couple months, ended for other reasons. But also just I've had a handful of clients over the years who are just like, oh my God, I feel so much shame and I'm single and how do I date with this? And no one's going to ever want to date me. But not everyone felt that way. Some people were just like, I take Valtrex and it's fine. Or I take, lysine or something and I manage it and it's so rare. It's like a non-issue. But other people, it was like, oh my God, like, how am I going to bring this up? And it was a real like shame spiral type of thing. So.
Well, and you bring up such an excellent point is you have oral herpes and it's not an issue. Yeah. It's not an issue. Right. Yet when you get it genitally, it becomes a different issue. And the silly thing is when you look at it, when you take a step back and look at it, it's the same thing. It's just a matter of where you have it, and it can still be sexually transmitted regardless of having oral herpes or genital herpes, right? So, right. And so you have people with oral herpes living their best life, dating, not thinking a thing about it, not thinking about disclosing, not thinking about any of that, nor do they know they need to disclose. And boom, you have people with genital herpes that are like you said, my life is over. How am I going to move on? How is anybody ever going to date me? I would be literally mortified if anybody found out.
I know. So, like, how did you make the decision to, instead of like, I'm just going to sit in like a little shame spiral the rest of my life is over, to like, I'm just going to actually like make this my career now and talk about it a lot?
I know. Well, I did sit in a shame spiral. I call it the Eeyore phase. We all know Eeyore and Winnie the Pooh. Eeyore, actually. He has the rain. He has the rain cloud over him. You know, he's just depressed. And I was there. I was there for 2 years, and I stayed there for 2 years, and I was turning 30, and I thought, I can't go into my 30s like this. Like, I'm wasting some beautiful, precious time in my life. And I'm wasting it just being in an ER phase. And, every day it was gloomy, even though it wasn't gloomy. And in that phase, everything piles on. So, herpes was the straw that broke the camel's back, we could say, but then everything piles on. So, again, I was turning 30 and I'm like, I can't keep this up. So I figured out how to get out of the ER phase. I figured out how to navigate through that. And I can get into that story in a second. But I when I was first diagnosed, my dear, dear friend said to me, she's like, look, you can either be a fighter and you can, help other people in your situation, or you could do nothing about it. And you're definitely a fighter. So you'll figure out a way.
Friend.
And when she told me this, we were driving, we're in our 20s, we're on our way to the bars. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, there's no way I could have this conversation with anybody. There's no way. Now, back in 2011, we didn't have the ability to do what we're doing right now. Podcasts were out there, but really hard to record a podcast. Facebook groups didn't exist. Instagram was really in its infancy. We didn't have video calls. We didn't have FaceTime on our iPhones, like all this stuff. It didn't exist. And so thank goodness we have technology that now allows us to share this message. So it was in 2017, I was at a podcast conference, which was where
we met. Yeah.
Where we met. Yes. And I was at a podcast, the same one, and I was asked to speak, and I got on stage and shared, and I had never shared to the public or just to partners. And I shared that I have genital herpes, and it was terrifying. I was shaking, terrifying, the whole thing. And so I did. And I realized that so many people came up to me. They either said, I have it too, and I've never told anybody, or I don't have herpes, but I have my story.
Something else,
Something else, which we all get a story. And we all let that shameful story be a handicap and hold us back. And really this story is, or whatever happens, is really our opportunity to fight through it and learn it and get through it. We're not given opportunities we can't succeed in. It's just, we're not meant to fail.
With that too. I think I'm more recently coming to that conclusion. I think things are a lot easier than we realize, and most of it's just mental drama. And it's like, if we learn how to get out of our own way, it's like miraculous things are possible.
That's all it is. We're in our own way.
Yeah. And I appreciate you kind of generalizing this a little bit too, because I'm sure, you would know the stats better, but it's a huge number, percent of the population that has one of the two herpes viruses, right?
Yes. So, and that's the thing. People are not tested for herpes, so I don't know how they get accurate stats. I guarantee you if they tested everybody, it would come back like some astronomical number. 67% of the population have HSV1.
Oh, really? Just that one? Okay.
I bet it's higher because I have personal friends, family members that have it, and they've never been tested for it.
Yeah, well, that's true.
So they're not included in that statistic. I've been tested for it. I know I have it. And then 13% have HSV too. So when you bring that together, that's roughly 80% of the population, which I think is more, but 80% is living with herpes. So we have this mindset that I know why you have herpes because you're promiscuous, or that person you dated, clearly a disaster, and that's why you have it, right? And really, it's that one person has an 80% chance.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, first of all, I don't care how many sexual partners anyone's had. Like, go do your thing, whatever. But also, like, it only takes having sex with one person, or even just oral sex.
Exactly. I can't tell you. I mean, again, yes, at some point, like if you have sex with 100 people, you're obviously at a higher risk than if you had sex with one.
Yeah.
Clearly. However, that one person has such a high chance that, I have so many people that have been married or in monogamous relationships, and all of a sudden it pops up.
Oh, that's
they were never
fascinating. And you don't think it's like cheating involved?
Correct. It happens all the time. And of course, I don't know exactly every relationship, but it does happen often enough that the virus can be dormant for decades. And so if we're not getting tested for herpes, it's not included in our STD,
this is like so
STI
much important information that you're sharing. Like, I want everyone to be like, it's not included in your panels, and it can be dormant for years, and it doesn't mean your spouse is cheating. So just FYI, everyone.
So yeah, it can be dormant. Like I love to share this story, and it helps put it in perspective. Again, we have the idea that it's promiscuity or deviant lifestyle or careless behavior, things of that nature. And there was a woman that came to me, and her mother was diagnosed with genital herpes at 80. And she had been widowed for 15 years. And
crazy.
She had been married. Yeah, she'd been married for 50 years and monogamous for 50 years. So here you have an 80-year-old woman going.
Are we sure she didn't have a lover?
Where did this come
at 80?
I know. I mean, but according to the daughter,
who may or may not know, yes,
this was what. So I said, they're like, how did this happen? And I said, well, either your mom picked it up before she met your dad, or your dad picked it up before he met your mom. He either knew he had it or didn't know he had it. Like, period, the end. And your mother picked it up clearly at least 15 years ago. And it just now showed up. So it goes to show you, this is not, because I talk to people in their 60s. I talk to people in their 70s. Very few in their 80s. But it's become a big thing post-divorce. Because you get through that whole childbearing of like birth control, all that. And we think that the young are the promiscuous, and you got to worry about STDs. And when you're in your 50s, let's say, you're like, oh, we're so far past that. I get a lot of newly divorced people with their first relationship,
and I work with people 50s and 60s who are dating, and it doesn't mean you're immune to anything just because you're older. It's like the pregnancy concern is very separate than the STI concern.
But I think so many people think, okay, if I'm doing it the right way, if I'm using a condom or I'm with one person, then I'm not going to get it. If I'm monogamous, I'm not going to get it. And so you don't think about STDs. And what we don't realize is STDs can be different in men and women. And I'm not talking about herpes. I'm speaking about other ones. And I'm not an expert in other ones, but they can be dormant and they can look different symptoms for men and women.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I think, I might actually have my primary care person on to talk about some of the testing options that are available for like other ones. But I know testing for herpes can be a little bit tricky. Because when I was dating the guy, I was like, well, let me get tested first and see what do I already have, because I was aware somewhat that I'm like, I know I have, oral herpes, but I don't know if it's HSV1 or HSV2, because either virus can be in either location, right?
It can be either location. You can have HSV2 oral, you can have HSV2 genital, you can have HSV1 oral and HSV2 genital, and HSV1 genital. And right now, our teenagers and 20s are getting genital HSV1. They're getting cold sores, oral herpes down there.
Are the sores actually different? Like they're basically the same thing. Okay.
They look the same. They do the same thing. Now, that's a really great question about the sores. They can appear in a couple different ways, but it's not going to say like, oh, because it's oral herpes, it's going to look one way, and genital herpes is going to look a different way. But the herpes blister can appear in one blister, a cluster, or a paper cut.
Paper cut. Interesting.
So you have a lot of women, a lot of times, so you get sometimes flu-like symptoms. You feel like you have the flu, and you go to the doctor and you're like, I don't know what's going on. I have the flu. And then the doctor does an exam and they're like, I have a little paper cut down here. And they look and they're like, well, that's herpes. And people don't assume that it's a herpes outbreak. It's not what you see on Google.
Interesting. You're so
Mhm.
expert about this. It's great. So I kind of, let's go backwards a little bit. I kind of want to know,
Okay.
how did you get over the shame spiral? Like, what did you do to work through that in those couple years?
Right. So again, I was turning 30. I was still dating the guy that I
Okay.
got herpes from. I stayed with him because I was just scared, and I thought I had to settle, and it wasn't the right relationship for
Okay.
either one of us. It
Okay.
became toxic, but I stayed because I was scared. I didn't know how to get out. So I decided, again, 30. I can't keep this up. So I moved locations. I was like, new house, new environment. Number one, I moved. Number two, I started really spending time in the self-help and the spiritual and understanding, being able to process emotions, being able to process and speaking kindly to yourself and not beating yourself up. I started working on love. I realized that once I was diagnosed with herpes, I shut down love. Like there was no love in my life. I couldn't watch movies like, like Bridesmaids or like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, any of those. I would just be pissed off. I would cry. I was angry. And I was like, this is not good. So I worked on that. I also worked on my health. I did acupuncture. I cleaned up my diet. I did all sorts of things like that. And one of the things, in order to put love in my body, and this can sound silly, but I realized I have to put love in my body. And for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's proven. It's a proven law. I thought, so if I'm not giving off love, there's no way I'm going to get love back. So I need to give off love in order to get love back. And love doesn't mean romantic. It means just, like not being dying on the vine looking person, So I would, that was when pink Himalayan salt came out. So I bought pink salt and I was like, okay, I'm putting pink, like that's color of love. And I would like sprinkle it on my food. And every bite I was like, I'm literally putting love in my body. And I literally filled up my body every day.
I love that. It's a really like simple, but like very tangible thing. And it seems like you were able to kind of define that for yourself with like the pink salt. But I mean, people could pick anything. They could be like, strawberries are going to be love for me, or pancakes, or like whatever. But like, like what feels like love to you?
I wore, I had this like little pink sapphire heart necklace. I wore that. I was like, love, like everything to me was love, like love, 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 love. And so it got me through that hump. And I then got the courage to break up, move on. And I started dating, and I was like, I'm not gonna let this hold me back. Any man that asks me out, I will go on a date with him, and I will ask men out too. Opposed to, so many of us are like, well, he's not my type. He's too tall. He's too short. He doesn't have hair. He has too much hair. He has a beard. I don't like beards. I like beards. Whatever it is.
Wow. So
I'll go out with you.
Okay. How did that go? Did you wind up on some bad dates, or was it fun?
I had a really fun time. Yeah, it was fun. It was, time in my life, and it was great. I learned a lot, and I learned about what I wanted and didn't want. And just to be clear, because we hear the word dating, we also hear the word sleeping with. So dating doesn't mean sleeping with, right? So I dated lots and lots and lots of men. You don't need to disclose you have herpes unless you're going to expose them to it. So going to get ice cream on a Saturday afternoon, there's no need to tell that person that date I had herpes. So I went and had fun having my ice cream, whatever it was.
Yeah, I love that. And it sounds like you really did the work. Were you always spiritual, or do you feel like going through the herpes experience kind of pushed you more in that direction?
So there's religious, spiritual, all different things. I was grew up religious, kind of, not walked away, but kind of like, then I got very spiritual, meditations and things like that. So it brought me to that. And then I've kind of like combined it both.
I love that. That's awesome.
Together.
My experience was somewhat similar. I was raised Catholic and kind of left that, and then was kind of like officially Buddhist for a while. And I wouldn't say I'm like not Buddhist, but I'm kind of like nothing. I'm just spiritual now. And like, I was, a meditation guide, and I love Eckhart Tolle, who's no religion, and, stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that's so cool that it has kind of been such a holistic journey for you. I'm also curious. I mean, now, you've been dealing with this pretty well for a while. Like, how much does herpes kind of interfere with your daily life at this point? Is it a big thing, a tiny thing?
It's a tiny
That's
thing.
so good.
It's a tiny thing. Like, do I get outbreaks? Yes, I get outbreaks. Is it annoying when I get them? Yeah, it's annoying. Is it devastating, crushing? No. Is it annoying when you're on vacation with your spouse and you're like, that was what we wanted to do because our child isn't with us? And that can be annoying, right? But it's life, and you get creative, and you have other ways. And does it happen that often? No.
Yeah. That's cool. That's not that big of a deal. So what are some of the most like common misconceptions like about herpes, or like what are some of the most common things that people come to you with?
So I would say the biggest misconceptions are that when people get tested for STDs, they think that they're getting tested for everything, and you're not. So that's number one. The other big thing is we think we'll be able to look at somebody and see if they have it. We think like, oh, well, I'll look down there before we hook up and I'll see. There's no way to tell. Even if there's some outbreaks I have, and I'll be like, have my husband like, look, can you see it? And he's like, I can't see it. And I'm like, no way. I feel
interesting.
It. So even if they can be so little, like I said,
so you're just like very in tune with your body too. And like, not everyone's
like,
going to be that in tune with their body.
Just because that person is so attractive and caring and you have the butterflies, you're like, there's no way that person would have herpes. That person might have herpes. Like, and that's okay. You just need to have a conversation about it. There's ways around it to prevent transmission.
Okay.
If you have a conversation about it, you guys can figure out a system together.
I like that. Yeah. And I do think it's just way too stigmatized. It's like, it's just like little blister things. It's not going to like really hurt you. It's not going to like ruin your life. I think kind of like you're saying, like it's a nuisance, but people get so worked up about it. And I think in getting super worked up about it, we're perpetuating the stigma. So I kind of want to just tell people to like check yourself a little bit, like notice your reaction and notice, if you're unintentionally even like perpetuating the stigma of it. Because it's just made up and it's just a nuisance. That's my personal opinion. Yeah. So people kind of need to know herpes testing is something you have to request separately. You don't just go into your doctor and say, hey, I need an STI panel.
Test me. Yeah. On that, you brought up testing, and it's kind of hard to test for herpes. So I want to go back and talk about that. Yeah. There's 3 ways to be diagnosed with herpes. Number 1 is clinically. So that means a doctor, a medical provider, whatever, is able to look at the outbreak and then look at it, listen to your symptoms, the way it looks, and what symptoms you're having. They're able to diagnose you clinically with herpes. The pros of that are you can get the antiviral if that's something you want to take. You can get that soon. You can get that same day. You can get the medication in you same day if you want to take it. And that helps
like get rid of the outbreak or like prevent them or like prevent transmission?
Both. I'll get into that next. Yeah, because that's really important to talk about too. So you can get that in your system fast. The downside is you don't know what type you have. There's no way to look and say, well, that looks like. Right. So that's a downside. Okay. Number 2, the way to be diagnosed is to have an active lesion, an active outbreak, and have it swabbed. So you're swabbing for viral DNA. The good news about that is you know where you have it. You know if you have it oral or genital. The good news with that is you can get, hey, you have type 1, you have type 2, whatever type you have. The downside to that is if you do it at the wrong time, it can be negative. So perfect example, I have oral herpes, right? I have oral herpes. If you swabbed my mouth right now, it'd be negative. So you can't go in and be like, I just slept with someone that has herpes and can you swab me? And they'd be like, yeah, but there's nothing to swab. So that's a problem. Or if it's like healed, if like there's scabs and things, like and it's healed over, and then it's too late as well. Then it might have already.
So it's got to be active for this swab to work.
Not gone away.
Okay.
Right. So that has to be active. So then number three is a blood draw. Herpes does not live in our blood. It's not a blood disease. It does not live in our blood, does not live in our bodily fluids. It lives, it's in our, it's skin to skin. But we can create antibodies because it's a virus. So what they're looking for in the blood draw are the antibodies. The pros and cons to that are if you test positive with an antibody blood test, like you have it. There's no like, I don't know. The downside is you don't know where you have it because it's a blood draw. If you've never had an outbreak, which most people are asymptomatic and most people have never had an outbreak, they don't know where they have it. And you do know what you'll know what type. They'll be able to say you have type 1, type 2. The other downside is if it's brand new, you won't have the antibodies yet.
That's a good point. So how long should you wait after, like, if you had unprotected sex or just had a new partner? Like, is there any guideline on that?
I would go, and everyone's different. It can take up, they say like, like 90 days, 3 months. Other people say 6 weeks. But like I said, it can lie dormant for years. So I would say if you have new partners, I would get tested before, and then I would also get tested, during that partner, just, especially if it's something new.
I also think find a good provider that you're comfortable with and who's like not going to be judgy about your sexual activity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And just like you have to be an advocate for your own health.
Yeah, it's worth it. I think there's a lot of benefits to just letting go of the shame. It's like there's a lot more freedom, I would think, on the other side.
Right. And you wanted to know about the antiviral and what that does and how that supports people. So Valtrex is the branded antiviral. There's valcyclovir, there's acyclovir, there's a few different types, generic brands of it. So what it does is it keeps the virus dormant in our system. So when the virus is dormant, we're not having outbreaks. We're not shedding the virus. And so it does lessen the transmission rate by 48%. Oh, wow. So it is something that you can take that if you have herpes and your partner does not, or your partner does and you don't, or whatever, it is something that is FDA proven to help lessen the transmission. It does not mean that it's 100. It's like birth control. Like, can you still get pregnant? Yeah, you can still get pregnant.
So it's an option to consider. You can discuss with your partner, obviously, like consider if there's, side effects or whatever, but it's a good option to have. Are there other ways that people can kind of help reduce the likelihood?
Yeah, and here's a big misconception. People think that condoms, like, oh, just use a condom, you'll be fine. Yeah. And condoms are great. They are helpful. However, herpes is not a bodily fluid transmission. So that's what condoms are great for, right? This is skin to skin. What we don't realize is you can have herpes on any location really on your body. So we think like it's just genitals. Mine are on my tailbone. So so we could use all the condoms we want, but my tailbone is still exposed. Yeah,
100%. And that is a good thing to realize, for people, that it's like there's a whole region down there. Like, it sounds like any part of, genitals through, I didn't realize tailbone, actually. So I'm glad you said that, because people probably wouldn't even think if they had something on their tailbone that could even potentially be herpes. I wouldn't,
Yeah. And I had genital herpes for like at least 5 years before I got a tailbone outbreak. And I didn't think it was herpes. I was like, oh, I have a bug bite. And I have it. Like, I knew I had it.
And I do want to say to people too, like, my intention in talking about this is not to make people paranoid. And I only say that because I waited a while to have sex when I was younger because I was paranoid about pregnancy and STIs. And I think you just have to get to a point where you're just like, there's nothing that's zero risk, people. Like, there's so many health benefits to sexual activity, especially with someone that you feel secure with or that you feel safe with. So this is just presenting like, let's just also be aware. Let's be risk aware. That doesn't mean like be paranoid and never have sex. Just want to clarify that for anyone listening.
Right. I bring this information not to scare people or be like, well, you should go get tested because you probably have it. Unless they are mean to me. And I'm like, well, you should go get tested. But
Don't be
but
mean to her, you
I
guys.
don't mean it like that.
But no, I do think it's just good to be informed. And like last time I went to my doctor to do STI testing. I mean, he's great because he's super open and like he's just like very like we're chit chatty and like can talk about stuff, which is nice. And he's like super non-judgy. But he was also mentioning that there's different bacterial infections you can get as well that are not part of standard STI panels either. And I'm like, I'm a fucking sex therapist and I didn't even know any of this. Like, why is this not common knowledge? And so like, I just want people to be aware and educated about our bodies. And I think that's part of the stigma and shame too, is like, you know, let's just not look at this. This is like, you know, uncomfortable, or like people don't really need to know that, you know? And it's like, there's so much focus on like just preaching, you know, fear and abstinence. And it's like, what if it's more about like just being risk aware and making informed choices?
That's what it's all about.
So
yeah, that's what it's all about. And it's you brought that up about other bacterial infections. When I had my son, they tell you like, hey, when you check into the hospital, we're gonna just do some screens for some, you know, bacterial vaginal infections. And I'm like, you're testing me to see if I have STDs. You're not testing me for chlamydia and gonorrhea.
okay.
Like, I said that funny, gonorrhea, but like, you're not saying STDs. You don't want me to freak out, but that's what you're testing me for. Because they said that like 50% of the women come in have it, because it's not the chlamydia, gonorrhea. Like you said, it's just other bacterial infections that we pick up.
Yeah. I mean, I recently had one called ureaplasma that I'd never heard of before. So like, it was just like a 1-dose antibiotic, but I was like, why have I not heard of this? How many are there? Like, and people, and like you said, you know, you might look at a partner to see like, oh, are there sores? Are there lesions? Or even have certain conversations like, when was your last partner? Have you had unprotected sex recently? Blah, 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 blah. And like, there's just no foolproof plan.
And that's a big thing. Oh, well, I know my partner hasn't had sex with anybody in a long time.
Right.
Okay. Like when you first date someone, I'll ask people, I'm like, how did you know your husband or wife or spouse didn't have anything? Well, he hadn't been with anyone for a year. Okay. Oh, gosh. Well, herpes.
I know. I think we just really like to be in denial and just like, oh, like maybe I don't have to look at this. And so I feel like that's kind of what I want this episode to be about too. Like, let's be real and like, let's be honest with ourselves. And yes, you can face things.
Right. And just remember, like, it's so common. There is someone that you love unconditionally that has 100%. This. Right. So if you're in the space of like, there's no way I don't know anyone. Yeah, you do. There's someone you love unconditionally.
And everyone has HPV too. I mean, that's like another STI. It's just like, you guys, there's so many, like you probably all have one. So just like, I think we just need to like get over ourselves a little bit and like move on with it. But, can you tell us a little bit more about like, how do you work with people and, you know, how can they connect with you?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I found that was just a pain point for me, no pun intended on that one, but just an absolute pain point was there was no information out there when you're diagnosed with an STD or herpes. Again, this was in 2011. It was very sterile. It was very like, you know, CDC, Planned Parenthood, little blue figures for like pictures. It was just not at all what I wanted it to be. So number one, I wanted to create a website that had the information, that was happy, that was full of full of color. So just making sure that there's information. I have probably over 800 YouTube videos. I have a lot. I just want the information to get out there, and whatever way you can best understand it. Are you a reader? Are you a watcher? How do you take in the information? But really what I didn't have was a community. I didn't have a community. I didn't have anyone to talk to. So I created a community for people living with herpes. Huge. And that's really like my biggest, that's like my biggest like pride. I'm so proud of these people. They are recovering from their diagnosis. They are happy. They are changing their lives. They are making other changes in their lives. And it just makes me so happy. So I do have, it's called the Secret Society. And I have, you know, toolkits. I have the group. I have wellness products you can take if you have herpes. And if you do have herpes and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know, or I want to like, I don't want anyone to know, or I'm worried about it. I created a PDF download. It's 21 pages. If you just go to outbreakremedies.com, you can download it and it'll go right to your inbox. It has a lot of great information in there. Basically everything from A to Z, the herpes 101. What do you need to know? What is it? Things I may have forgotten to cover today.
That's amazing. Like that. It sounds like it would be a very thorough resource. So outbreakremedies.com. Yes. Okay. I think those are the two main things. It's like if people have the information they need and then they have a community, because one of the things I've learned just through my own journey and working with people and the type of work I do is like, it's like shame can't really exist when you shine light on it, you know? And so I think by sharing, by having a safe place to do that, it almost like bursts the bubble of the shame and you just like can't be totally living in shame anymore. So it's miraculous.
Yeah. And when you realize that it's a made up thing, shame is something that we've created. Like we created the shame, right? Like I created my own shame. It's not made up, but like I created my own shame. When you realize
it's our thoughts. It's the stories we have, the thoughts that we believe. And, you know, once we realize that it's actually more in our control than we had thought, it's like, then you're actually empowered to like go live the life you want as you've done. And it's just exciting to have you, you know, be an example of that for people. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.